All right, we are going to keep this train moving on schedule, just like we're in Japan. We don't want to apologize for a 10-second delay like that one time. Did anybody read that news article? Boy, they are on time over there. I wish Bart was that reliable. But we're going to continue this on. I am here with Ryan Seekely. Ryan is currently in transition to a new company, but was most recently Director of Infrastructure and Security at Quid, which is a data science startup here in San Francisco. And Ryan, you've been a good proponent of BeyondCorp. You were on a panel with us not too long ago. You've done a case study with ScaleFT, which we have printed there if you'd like to grab one. But you stumbled on BeyondCorp first in the process of a kind of a cloud migration. What were the things that kind of first drew you to the kind of BeyondCorp model?
Yeah, sure. So we were on Rackspace for like 6-7 years, and we just made the migration to AWS. And whenever you do a migration, it's always a good opportunity to try something new. And we tried quite a few things new, and going towards BeyondCorp was one of those things. We had Rackspace manage our VPN for the longest time. We had done pretty much everything else, but for some reason, nobody else wanted to handle the VPN, so we always just had Rackspace do that. And we were, I had heard of ScaleFT and BeyondCorp a couple years before, and it was something that always had just stuck in my mind. And when we're doing a migration, like I said, good time to try something, so we gave it a spin.
Good. That's very brave, because when you look at BeyondCorp through the lens of Google, I mean, this is a multi-year project with Google resources, and took many years and had full executive support. It was Quid, not Google, a much smaller company. How did you kind of approach it from like we're a smaller company, but we can still get the same outcomes perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're, to some extent, we were an ideal, or are an ideal company to give something like this a go. I mean, we're not so big that it's going to take a huge multi-year effort for us to give it a shot. We don't have to cover as many use cases as Google does. We're a little more flexible in what we can and can't try. We can be a little, since we are a smaller team, we can be a little sneakier about just putting things out there and seeing how they stick. Mm-hmm. So like our infrastructure is it's anywhere between 300 and 400 hosts. So it's not something, I mean, it's nowhere near gigantic, but it's big enough that I always describe it as annoying. And so I felt like that just put us in a good place to it wasn't going to be too daunting for us. I think a couple things past that made it pretty appealing. One is we had two pretty solid use cases that we knew we wanted to use it for. One was SSH access. We were already having to manage all the SSH access to those 300, 400 hosts ourselves, and this just seemed like a better approach. And then also, we exposed only a few resources internally to the external world, so as far as like web resources. So it wasn't like we were trying to cover a really, really wide network to everybody. We were just trying to cover a few things, and that helped us out.
Good. Well, I'm glad you said that you're the kind of ideal use case, because one of the double-edged swords about talking about BeyondCorp in the context of Google is it doesn't seem approachable. But really, when you break it down from the primitives and the actual use cases that you're trying to solve for, yeah, being a smaller company is actually kind of advantageous in this kind of new architecture. The last thing you want to do after doing a cloud migration is spend another 10 years doing a security migration.
Oh, for sure.
Just lined up. Yeah.
And it was convenient because, like I said, we were already doing SSH migration ourselves, or SSH management ourselves. All our developers often rely on doing some sort of local to remote host development for a lot of their development environments. So it's something we were already having to do anyways, and this just really seemed like a better way to go about it. Yep. And then having the web access exposure was also just convenient. When we cut off our VPN, nobody noticed in the whole company. So we managed to do it without not one complaint. The developers were already geared up on the new workflow, and nobody on the other side of the company, for as client services, even noticed the VPN was gone. So I felt like that was a pretty cool accomplishment, and really goes to show for somebody like our size, again, we aren't covering all of Google's use cases that they had. I mean, if you read their paper and you look at the resources they put into it, they had to cover all this stuff. But for us, it's like, hey, we needed SSH access, we had developers that need to be able to tunnel to things, and we had to expose a couple internal products to the outsource, or to the outside world. All this fit right in with the existing tooling that was there. So
awesome! Wow, I love that. I mean, that speaks volumes to obviously your abilities to implement this properly. But I got to ask, any gotchas in the process that you stumbled across?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a change in workflow. I mean, when you do have access to VPN, you do get access to the whole world. You log on, here's my key. You now have access to everything in the network. Mm-hmm. But now when you're doing it on a per resource basis, that means you have to have tooling to cover the per resource access. So I think some of the biggest gotchas for us was, again, we do a lot of tunneling, and we do a lot of trying to access our boxes in a developed environment, and being able to have multiple tunnels open, explaining to the developers how to do tunneling. I mean, this was something that they weren't used to. They were used to just clicking the button and it's signing on. So we had to spend some amount of time developing tooling to make that an easier process. So I would say that was a gotcha.
Sure.
The other one is, when we now are going through, we use ScaleFT, so we go through a web access proxy, and that is another route that things are going through, and so that causes slight complications that when you're whenever you have a request go through another party, sometimes it gets a little messed up by the time it gets to you, and that's been a little bit of a trip too.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay.
But you're gaining kind of these finer grained, access controls, and then, auditing was important to you. How do you kind of look at that information to kind of get an understanding of your environment?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think nobody on our side wanted to manage a VPN, right? So and then whenever we wanted to make changes to the VPN, it was always like some hornet's nest of network access rules, and there's a lot of turnover on both Quid side and Rackspace's side over the years. I mean, I was there for 5.5 years, and you ask, like, what is this rule there for? Nobody necessarily knows. It's just some random IP address, and by the end of it, we probably had like 5-6 networks all linked together, because we have 3 offices, we had 3 cloud accounts, we had a dedicated account. So right there's 7 networks that are just all these intermixed rules, and it was really complicated to keep that all managed correctly, and whenever a change was made, it was risky. So switching to something, to just resource specific, allowed us just kind of bypass all of that and look at things on a resource basis.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, and it's easy for those environments to just kind of continue to snowball and get more complicated. And even, Quid is a fairly smallish, newish company, still have all of these, disparate environments. Imagine,
certainly.
large enterprises that have just, decades and decades of technical debt. How would you kind of, approach it? Would you kind of stick with a kind of use case by use case basis, or would you recommend something else?
I mean, what was great about it is, like I said, we did it without anybody noticing. When we turned off the VPN, no one noticed, and we were largely, because you could do them side by side. There was no reason, like you could have the VPN for as long as we needed to have the VPN. We could have the Beyond Corp model for as long as we wanted to do that, and we moved the Beyond Corp model to the point where we felt it was equivalent. We were able to turn off the VPN. There was nothing to say we couldn't have both. I mean, you sign on the VPN, you have access to everything, and one day you just turn that off and you try to use all the Beyond Corp tooling you have.
Yeah.
So we were able to do it very incrementally, and
Perfect.
we started with just the main developer that was working on the tooling. Then it spread to my team that was using it, and then we spread to the developers, and then we just turned it off for the whole organization. I could definitely see it working even if we had more networks. Let's say we were somebody's Google side. There's no reason a part of an organization couldn't just start doing for their part, and eventually it just eats the world, because to Mark's point, this stuff needs to be getting easier and needs to be more accessible, and if it is the path, people are going to naturally pick it up.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been the biggest success point for this whole DevOps movement, or DevSecOps, or anything, has been making things software, letting developers run with it, and then it becoming the easiest path. The most times I was successful at my job was because it became the easier way, not because I just dumped something on the developers. Whenever I got a stack of papers, or I had some policy or some idea and it was like, this is the way forward, it caused a lot of tension or a lot of anger, and it was something you had to like work through and build a lot of relationships. But when it became an easier way to do things, it just naturally took off. And I think with the Beyond Corp stuff, and with the ScaleFT tooling, and where this is going, all these security tooling, it's becoming more a developer tool, which means we build automation, which means we make it the easier path, which means everyone just naturally wants to use it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Docker. Like everybody, it made our developers' lives easier. Why wouldn't they want to do that?
Right.
So I feel the same thing about all the security tooling that's coming down.
I mean, I love hearing you talk about this, because it's such a great success story, and it's such a different success story from Google, even though you got the same kind of outcome and from your small team and your small company. Now, I know one thing that's important to you is the kind of delivery model of security, and how we actually, as a vendor, come to a company like you. What do you want from vendors? I know it's something that's important to you. How do you want us to approach you with tooling like this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, we're a 150-person organization, And security is supposed to be important nowadays. I mean, it's always been supposed to be important, but I think like increasingly, especially with all the Facebook stuff that's coming out, and the Equifax leak coming out, like it's just increasingly being hammered and hammered and hammered. And one of the most astonishing things to me is like, you can start a company, a few people, and you start making some serious money. You're not going to just have like, oh, Ryan, you've done your taxes before. Why don't you do our accounting, right? Like that's not a thing. Like you hire an accountant, you hire an accounting team, even if it's external. I feel like with security though, that hasn't quite been the case. You're allowed to start a company, and again, to Mark's point, it's something you add on later. It's at some point you go like, we need to have a secure company. We need to add on all this security, but that's kind of nuts to me. Like, you should be able to start a company that you're going to handle sensitive data and not have that from the start. I mean, our accounting team is at 150 people is bigger than some of our developers' teams. And, it should be the same thing for security. And it should be something you have to do from the beginning. There should be a security arm or a security a team or something along those lines. But with a company our small, that's hard to sell, right?
Right.
So my plea to the security, companies out there is to make it more accessible and the easy path, right? Like right now, security to me feels like this very inaccessible thing for companies that are inexperienced with security or don't have the dedicated resources to do it. Right. And so when something like ScaleFT comes around, or something like Alt0, or something like HashiCorp's Vault comes around, it makes it so much more accessible to us that it's going to be the natural path. So, I mean, for companies to approach us, what I would suggest is make it easy. Like make it like we have to use external vendors. We have no choice. Like there's no way we can build. Google for Beyond Corp spent multiple years and multiple very smart people building this. We're never going to be able to do that. We need external help. But right now it feels like security's always been, again, slightly inaccessible and hard.
Right. Well, I think it goes back to a lot of what Mark was saying about, it kind of traditionally being seen as kind of a blocker. Drop this in here and you are, one more layer of defense and depth, and you continue to drop these things. And those are walls, they're kind of meant to be blocking. But if you kind of inject security into these kind of, DevOps kind of automated environments, those are enablers. And the more you can kind of enable your kind of developers and the rest of your entire company, the better off you're going to be. But again, it's going to take, it takes some education across the company, having dedicated people who are knowing what to look out for. But I'm glad that you recognize that as kind of, because you had responsibility of both infrastructure and kind of security. So that's tough.
And to your point, and again, to just dropping things on dust, we have a strong consultancy arm in our company. So our company is we ingest unstructured data of any kind, whether it's news data or company profiles or surveys or reviews, and we spit out insights from that. Companies have the option of giving us pretty sensitive data, and we can do that either from the product perspective or we can go through a consultancy arm. So that means our consultancy is regularly handling confidential information. Everybody in the company that I've talked to wants to do two things. One, they want to handle things sensitively, but two, they want to do their frickin' job. And those things aren't always necessarily in line.
Right.
And so like when you just drop policy down, doing their job's going to win out. I mean, that's increasingly the battle that IT has and DevOps has had and security has, is that there's things like Box, there's things like Slack, there's Gmail, there's all these cloud services that in order to do your job nowadays, you need to use these services. And so if you just try to drop a policy that says you can't use Box or you have to use Box in a certain way, it's not going to work. People are going to ignore it. They're going to skirt it because they're just trying to do their job. We have to find ways to make those things fit into the Beyond Corp model or a model like that and also be accessible so that, again, it's just the path and not some policy they have to remember.
Becomes a persona challenge too, because I mean, if you're coming at it from a very technical perspective and you have technical users that kind of understand the policy, how IT departments work, but you mentioned you kind of have these consultants or kind of different personas that are accessing very sensitive privileged data. We run across this a lot. Like think of like a TV studio like Netflix, right? So Netflix has the production line of getting a TV series out has a lot of third-party contractors who are there to just kind of set up some stuff, record some TV shows, and then get out. They need to be able to push that information into like really sensitive areas. And if you leak the next, what was it? Orange is the New Black. Like the whole season got leaked.
Yeah.
It's because some contractor, didn't know the policy or security policy and just kind of was like, all right, well, I have access to this now. I can get rid of it.
Right.
How do you inject these kind of, technical kind of themes and architectures to personas that maybe are not so tied to your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's tough. I mean, I think security, when it comes to the softer stuff, is a tough thing. You have to. I mean, typically you don't have engineers that are very evangelical or very friendly, but I think that's what you have to do. Is you have to be very evangelical about it. You have to be very friendly. You have to be very best effort about it. You can't be the curmudgeon that just says you can't do this thing. You can't be the curmudgeon that just tries to stomp on everybody or tries to punish somebody for leaking the Orange is New Black. There's going to be casualties. There's going to be mistakes. What you're trying to do is let people do their job and rein in the chaos to some extent. So put as much evangelism, put as much security owners out there, and put as much positive tooling out there that allows people to do their job, but kind of keeps the chaos in a contained area.
Right.
I don't think there is ever going to stop. You're never going to completely stop someone leaking a TV show. You're never going to stop somebody from mishandling confidential information. It's always a best effort, no matter, it's always going to be best effort. So if it's not ingrained in the culture in a positive way, you don't have any chance of making it best effort. Instead, you have people trying to resist or trying to subvert.
Right. Again, I mean, I think Mark said, security, you want to block the bad guys still, but, enable the good people to kind of get through. And
sure.
That's a continually juggling act and different personas and, employees, contractors. I mean, that's hard for anybody, but I think coming at it from the right architecture of this is how we're supporting these environments, and the more that we know, the more visibility we have, I think the better off we'll be. But we're still going to read about things getting leaked and hacked on a day-to-day basis. But
I mean, one of the nice
keeps
things...
us employed, I guess.
Oh, yeah, but definitely. DevOps has definitely kept me employed for the last 5.5 years. I mean, one of the nice things about BeyondCorp and a tool like ScaleFT for us least access is supposed to be the de facto means of security. It's probably the best policy you could have to make sure people don't accidentally leak things that they're not supposed to. If somebody is going to leak Orange is the New Black, at least make sure that person was supposed to have access to that episode in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Make sure it was a stakeholder and not just somebody that was flyby. And so for us, to be able to do that at a developer perspective, it starts with us is that we can now limit our developers to the specific machines they need in the specific environments. And we can do it in real time, cut on, cut off. I need access to get this piece of customer data for this use case. They give explicit consent. Great. Turn it on. They get the access. We turn it off. So it's been really nice to be able to build on top of that least access tenant in the developer realm. What I'm looking forward to is seeing if we can do that same thing beyond developer tooling.
Right.
I think it'd be cool if we could start seeing more integrations with companies like Box and Slack and Google and they all have this problem, and I'm sure a lot of their customers have this problem. It'd be cool to see if BeyondCorp and these companies can somehow cross paths so that if someone from my company accesses Box, it goes through the BeyondCorp model first, or someone goes through Google, it goes through BeyondCorp first. And I don't mean necessarily just authentication, but again, continuously being do I have access to the specific folder of this resource instead of having it be completely separate ecosystems.
Right. You kind of, every SaaS application will have different models for roles and things like that. But, taking some of the standards around, user identity and authentication authorization from a policy perspective into those applications, I think would be a great kind of next step. And there's obviously some things you can do with SAML and other tooling, but everything's got to be kind of standard. There's a lot of different flavors of all that stuff. But architecturally, everything's, it's the same. Every SaaS app just becomes another resource you're controlling access to. And then once you're in, you're, that person and you have access to the different types of things.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's a natural evolution of this model. So it's not just the resources that, you control. It's SaaS applications that your employees are all working with.
Yeah, again, because we're not a Google. Google has tools for everything themselves.
Yeah.
They built it all themselves. They have it all. They can secure it however they want. They can fit it right in their framework. We don't have that choice. We have to do SaaS tools. It's just not going to happen otherwise.
Right.
And, so people are going to try to do their jobs. They're going to use SaaS tools. IT is going to, shadow IT. They're going to keep an eye on what's being used, and we're going to try to rein in the chaos. And the best way to do that is all these things play nice together. And right now they don't really. I mean, like identity providers, like you said, there's a million ways to do it right now, and you have a lot of companies coming at different angles that all get like 50% there, and that was one of my biggest frustrations, was how kind of close all these companies like Okta, OneLogin, Duo, I mean to some extent ScaleFT, like they all do a part of the thing, but none of them kind of interpolate where they get cut off. They just you now have to use this other tool for a completely different use case, and you have to manage all your identities over there again. And it's extremely frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, these ecosystems get fragmented really quickly, and I think, trying to bring it together in some sort of, standards have, pros and cons, of course, but some way that everything kind of can communicate effectively with each other is a positive way. And, I know you're going into a new gig and you have a vacation first, so I won't scare you too much, and hope you enjoy that time before you jump in and have to tackle all these problems all over again.
Yeah,
but
right.
just hearing you talk about the outcomes and just the way that you perceive this project and it didn't scare you away it's so great and refreshing to hear, especially as a lot of people are trying to figure out what this means for them. I think your case study is just top notch, and thank you so much for being here. I think we have maybe time for one question. I just got the head nod no, but we'll try anyway. All right, sir.
Thanks for the insight. So
Sure.
My understanding of Beyond Corp is relatively new. I mean, limited. So, but what I want to understand is in larger organizations, when we are rolling out Beyond Corp and we have a traditional VPN, how can we face it? Like, is there even a phased approach? Should we face it by users and devices, or should we face it by at the application level, right? Okay, these applications go through this channel, and these follow the standard.
Yeah, I mean, if I was, I mean, obviously every company's going to be completely different. I'm also relatively new to the Beyond Core thing, so I don't think I'm like some complete authority. But I think the application level was a good one. That's how we did it. We were able to do chunks of servers at a time, and then we were also able to do one application at a time. When I left Quid, we were still doing that. We were just like, we started with very developer-facing resources, and then we moved to like our staging environment, and now we're looking to do some of the more production tooling that everyone has access to, and that worked very well, just application at a time. It's really, when you use a tool like ScaleFT, it's really minimally disruptive. Like, you don't notice the switch between a VPN and the ScaleFT tooling. I mean, you click a button, it goes through the Google Auth, and it works. And so ideally, again, you can have both at the same time until you can just turn one off. And I think going the application approach and group of people would work great.
Perfect. We recommend the same. Well, thank you again, and please enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
We're all
Definitely
incredibly
will.
jealous.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. We're going to take another 5-minute break, and we'll be right back.
Appreciate it.